Hi, my name is Sue. I'm honored to be a CHAYIL woman with Miriam and the rest of the tribe. Come and join me today before the throne of God as he teaches us about strength, strength that is so important for today and so necessary for tomorrow. Strength is often perceived as physicality in our culture. We look at people who can lift great weights and we call them strong. Some people like strong coffee, some people like not so strong coffee. Some of us are put off by people that are too strong. We avoid them, don't want confrontation with them. And other people, we confront them, but sometimes we often confront them with manipulation. Webster's dictionary defines strength as a quality or state of being strong. It's the ability to resist a powerful force. It also is the ability to resist an attack. Force is often measured in degrees of strength, potency, concentration, rising tendency. Most of us remember the call of the Lord and the call of Moses to Joshua before he led Israel into the promised land to be strong and courageous. And it's interesting when the Lord says this for a final time to Joshua, he actually commands it. He commands strength from Joshua, as well as commanding courage. It must have worked for Joshua because at the very end of his leadership time, it was the command he gave to the nation of Israel as they were in the promised land, divided up among tribes, to be strong and to be courageous. So strength alone is not enough to face what we face day to day or year to year or season to season. We have to take courage as well for what's ahead of us. There are a lot of other Old Testament scriptures that reference strength, but with other things. In regards to courage, David commands Solomon to be strong and courageous. The Psalms tell us to be strong and take heart, to be strong in the Lord because we trust him, that God is our strength and our portion forever. It's not a temporary thing. Miriam, when they crossed the Red Sea and she sang her victory song, said that the Lord is our strength and our song. What a blessing when we're feeling weary. Isaiah reminds us that God is our strength and our help, and the Lord often pairs the strength with waiting on him, waiting for his strength. The same Hebrew word, however, also is used in strength in what we would call a negative or difficult connotation. When it says that the condition of Pharaoh's hardened heart is hard, whether God hardened it or he hardened it, the word that's used is strength. There was a strength involved in hardening his heart. The Old Testament also mentions a strong famine. It mentions a strong wind. It mentions human persistence or stubbornness as being part of strength. Divine power or strength is used in the same way. All of these forms of strength do relate to what Samson goes through in Judges 16, which we'll talk about later. Paul takes a very godly look at strength through his epistles. He does it individually by reminding Timothy that the Lord has stood by him and strengthened him, and therefore he will do the same thing for Timothy in his call to the church at Ephesus. Paul reminds the church at Philippi that he's been able to do all things through Christ who strengthens him. He reminds the Colossians that as they bear fruit and they walk with the Lord, that they will be strengthened with all power according to what the Lord has for them. Paul actually prays strength over the church of Ephesus and says that they will be strengthened through the power of the Holy Spirit through their innermost being, so that Christ may dwell in their hearts. And it's Paul who confesses that when he is weak, he is strong. And he observes for the Corinthians that the weakness of God is stronger than any strength of man. It seems like the Bible does agree that there is strength in numbers, that two are better than one. If two lie together, they keep warm, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Iron sharpens iron. Iron, just like one man, will sharpen another man. Where two or three are gathered, Jesus is among them. There's strength, there's power. And do not neglect to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encourage one another as you meet together, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. In the case of one of the strongest men in the Bible, however, he was a lone operator. He didn't operate with any other man. He only operated in the might of the Lord with his mighty exploits. And let's see what we can learn from his strength. Samson was born at a time when Israel was in the promised land. The Lord had left the adulterous tribes in Israel to test Israel in order that the generations that had not experienced war would experience war, or they would be taught it. At the time of Samson's conception, Israel had done evil in the sight of the Lord, and he'd given them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. The first lesson we can learn from Samson's life is that strength comes from dedication to the Lord. Samson, interestingly enough, was dedicated to the Lord from the womb. There was actually an angel of the Lord that came to his mother and said, "Follow these Nazirite dietary rules for drink and for food." And she did. And she chose at his birth to name him Samson, which means son man or son of service. Samson grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him before he made his way into the world. The next lesson we learn from Samson is that strength is for confrontation and for victory. The first confrontation that Samson met with the Spirit of the Lord was with a young lion that was coming running towards him on his way to meet this Philistine woman that he had found attractive and planned to marry. Satan is often described as a prowling lion, just like that. Just when we're alone, he prowls on us. He is the enemy of us because he is the enemy of our God. Samson encounters this lion, and he not only conquers this lion, but he tears them with his brute force hands, like it says someone would normally kill a goat. Now, I've never seen anyone kill a goat, but I cannot imagine killing a goat, let alone a lion, with my bare hands. But Samson, because he was endowed with the strength of the Lord, was able to do this. Samson not only killed this lion that was out to attack him on the road, but he went back to the carcass of the lion later and found bees and honey that were there. So he was actually able to enjoy the spoils of his victory, and he was able to share those spoils with his mother and father. Samson was just the vehicle the Lord needed at this time to deliver Israel. He was a vessel of the Spirit of the Lord. The Lord had come upon him mightily, and he showed amazing strength. The third lesson we can learn from Samson is that God uses our flesh or weaknesses for his victory purposes, so his strength can be shown. It's interesting that Samson's parents met this marriage of their son to a Philistine woman with opposition. Although it was allowed in the law, they wanted him to stay within the nation of Israel and marry. And he said no. Samson actually went, met the lion on the road, encountered the woman. They made plans for marriage. However, the interesting thing to that is that God used Samson's desire for this beautiful woman to place him into the enemy camp of the Philistines. It placed Samson in the right place at the right time for the Lord to win not only one battle, but several battles by Samson. Again, single-handedly, he beat 30 Philistines. Then he beat 300 Philistines. Then he beat 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone of an ass, all orchestrated and all completed by the Spirit of the Lord in Samson, working in tandem with him, but with no other fleshly being around. God is the one who gives us our strength even in our weaknesses, brute strength even in the camp of the enemy, to show his strength and his might. The fourth lesson we can learn from Samson is that strength can be depleted, and it's at those times that we need refreshing. After the battle of 1,000, Samson was tired, and his tiredness made him fear that he was going to be possibly captured by the Philistines at that point in time. But Samson wisely chose, after his physical strength was depleted, to cry out to the Lord. And after that battle, he cried out for water because he was very, very thirsty. And the Lord provided water for him, and Samson's strength returned. It was at the returning of his strength that Samson went from being a mighty warrior for the Lord to actually being a judge in Israel. He was a judge in Israel, a leader in Israel for 20 years in the land of the Philistines. So let's remember that that strength paired with the Spirit of the Lord and the ability to call on him to meet our weakened flesh enables us not just to conquer, but it enables us to rule, to have that endurance that we need to lead people to Christ. Samson's story continues on in a very significant battle between light and darkness. Most of us remember or know of the story from the book of Judges of Samson and Delilah. It's interesting that Delilah's name is actually a variation of night. And Delilah was representing a darkness that was in the camp of the Philistines, whereas Samson, son God, son man, son of light, was to fall in love with this woman and have relations with this woman. But because she was on the dark side, she was very tricky. She wanted to use her opportunity, use this as an opportunity for the Philistines to come and get Samson. They'd been after him for a long time. Interestingly enough, she wants to know where Samson's strength comes from. Now let's put that into perspective. Samson had defeated 30, 300, and 1,000 men. If she wants to know where his strength comes from, and she's been close to him, he must not have looked like a very strong man if she questioned where his strength came from. But yet he was strong in the Lord and the power of his might in doing his bidding in the camp of the Philistines. We know the rest of the story that Samson confesses that according to him, his strength comes from the length of his hair. He falls asleep in her lap. She calls for someone to come in and shave his head. And Samson wakes up. And interestingly enough, he doesn't know that the Lord has departed from him in the process of having his hair cut. After his hair is cut and his strength is gone, the Philistines come in. His spiritual eyes apparently have gone out, as well as his physical eyes, because he can no longer tell that the Lord is with him. And he's placed in a prison. We only truly end up in the dark in our lives when we know the Lord has departed from us. But Samson's hair grows back in prison. He is given work to do. He can't see. And he wants to be avenged for not being able to see, because that was such a strong quality of his while he was out of prison, while he was a warrior, and while he was a judge. So Samson is brought out for entertainment purposes for the Philistines during a feast of Dagon. There's 3,000 of them. They're not 3,000 average Philistines either. They're 3,000 rulers, their wives, their families, quite an influential group of Philistines. Now they're pridefully rejoicing, not only because of their god Dagon, but they're also rejoicing because they've captured Samson after all these years. Samson desires to be avenged for his blindness. He has a young man place him between two pillars. And for the first time, Samson publicly cries out to the Lord for strength. He wants to be avenged, and he's willing to die with the Philistines if his strength is returned for one more battle. He pushes. Whatever the platform is that's above him or below him collapses. And Samson has the greatest victory of strength that day. 3,000 Philistines at his hand, and his life as well. A very, very sacrificial act on the part of Samson. If you remember Benny Hinn recalls a dream of Catherine Kuhlman's. It's very, very similar to the story of Samson. In this dream of Catherine's, there were 3 men that were walking with Jesus. The first man was hugged by Jesus. He was held onto by the Lord. The second man was just touched by Jesus. And the third man was passed by. Catherine Kuhlman asked the Lord, well, what does this mean? I don't understand. And the Lord told her that the first man was weak, the second man was discouraged, and the third man was strong. Catherine went on to interpret that if God doesn't hug you or tap you, you must be strong. You must be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. You have what you need. If you feel you need him, that is when you are weak. That's when he comes in and hugs you. That's when he comes in and holds you. And when you seek him, when you're discouraged, you will grow. He'll give you that tap on the shoulder and tell you, it's okay, you're going to make it. The same was true in Samson's life. God was with him in those early exploits. There was no talk. They didn't have conversations. God's Spirit was in him, and God's Spirit moved Samson to do great and mighty things. There was no need for conversation or assurance because that strength was there with Samson. When Samson was blind and in violation of his Nazirite vow, he needed the Lord. The Lord had left him. And yet, when Samson called to the Lord for strength that one time of his life, the Lord embraced Samson's cry. And he'll embrace our cry as well. And like Samson, we may have the mightiest defeat of our life as we cry out to the Lord and he embraces us. And when Samson was thirsty after that jawbone battle, he got the encouragement from the Lord he needed from a hollow place. The Lord let water spring forth that Samson might be refreshed and encouraged and step in his new position as judge. If this is truly a day for victory for our soon and coming King, we've got to be strong. It's our portion as his warriors who will rule and reign. So let's be strong and courageous. Our victory and his victory is at hand. God bless you all.